My name is Sam. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. And Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a ton of great free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed at every stage of your career. We will be taking questions at the end of today's webinar. You'll find that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to leave any questions there, either as yourself or anonymously, and we'll get to as many as possible at the end. We're also recording today's session, and we'll be sending it out in a follow-up email later today, along with Nicole's contact info. So if you have any questions or you want to rewatch this back, you'll have the ability to do so then. Here with me today is Nicole Dove. Nicole is Director of Information Security at Warner Media, where she's the executive partner responsible for the cybersecurity portfolios of business units that deliver technology solutions. Before working at Warner Media, she held technology consulting and risk management strategy roles at ADP, Goldman Sachs, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Rockstar Games, where she did voiceover work on the Guinness Book of World Records best-selling video game title Grand Theft Auto. What a fun fact. Outside her roles at Warner Media, Nicole hosts the Urban Girl Corporate World podcast, which has featured Fairygodboss's very own president, Romy Newman, a former White House senior advisor, co-president of the Harvard University Student Community and Theater Organization, executives from Amazon, IBM, a Dubai-based technology and innovation leader, and social entrepreneurs as guests. Thank you so much for being here today, Nicole. Over to you.
Thank you, Sam, for such a wonderful introduction, and thank you to each of you who've made time to attend today. I want to just start by saying that I'm fully aware that all the amazing opportunities that I've had are really the results of sacrifices of people who've come before me, and those sacrifices really motivate me to move the needle for those who come alongside and those who come even after me. I really believe in the power of storytelling and sharing experiences. And it's an honor to tell my story to each of you today. So it starts in New Jersey, where I was born and raised, in case you didn't catch the accent already. I'm the proud daughter of a retired banker, my mom, and a musician, my dad. So I grew up with a balance of structure and creativity. For my parents, what I noticed was that many of the opportunities that they had came through relationships that they had built. Not that they weren't talented, but they were really able to showcase those talents because of spaces that were created by connections that they had built and cultivated over time. And those learnings are a big part of what's inspired the content for today's session. In August, I started my new role with Warner Media, helping build information security programs. So this is a timely reminder of what it took to get here and what it will take to continue in an upward path in this new phase of my career. So I wanted to start out with a very, very bold and statement, just saying that I win, and I am unapologetic about recognizing and honoring the winner within myself and all of you. That's important for me because within some of the professional spaces I began to have access in throughout my career, it was quite obvious that a lot of people treated me as if I should be happy to be there, and happy to be here is just not enough. It is important that we all, especially women professionals, understand that we're valuable, we're talented, we're capable, and that we have what it takes to win. So I hope today's webinar encourages each of you to walk in expectation of opportunity and seek to create impact and make your mark. Understand there is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to win and exceed and excel, and be intentional about finding spaces that allow you to do and be just that. So before we start today's discussion, I just want to lead in with the affirmation, if you will, that we are winners and there is nothing wrong with expecting success, impact, and legacy. Now, I can't see all of your lovely faces, so if you are with me, just go in the chat and type, "We are winners." Yes, there we go. Yes, we are certainly winners. So I want to start just talking about some of my background. So I started my career on Wall Street and spent a few years working for a Big Four accounting and consulting firm. After that, I worked at Rockstar Games in their internal audit department, but got to do some fun stuff like voiceover work on 2 GTA titles. After 5 years at Rockstar, I moved over to ADP, and that's where things just began to take off for me. In 2015, I wrote a proposal that was ultimately approved by the company president to live and work in Romania as an expat. And while there, I led 2 large initiatives that turned a 500% ROI in pilot. A month after I came home, I got promoted. And after that, I received 3 more promotions over the next 5 years. In 2016, I attended the White House Summit on the United States of Women. And 1 month later, I started my career in speaking. My first speaking client being Deloitte Consulting. Others include Yale University School of Management, Goldman Sachs, MLT, Anita Borg, Clark Atlanta University, et cetera, et cetera. The next year in 2017, I was one of 2 associates selected to represent ADP in Africa alongside Habitat for Humanity for a community service project building sustainable housing in Malawi. And after 30 days of launching my podcast, Urban Girl Corporate World, I acquired listeners over 6 continents. Now, all of that's important because each of these wins, both inside and outside of the workplace, were connected to or possible because of the relationship and rapport I had built with different leaders. And today's session is going to outline the framework that I use to make these things possible. So if you're ready to see what's possible, type "show me the money" in the chat. Hey, Kelly, one of my ADP colleagues. Yes, show me the money. All right. So I've got to start out with something that even I learned from myself earlier in my career. There seems to be sometimes a disconnect between the win and the work for many professionals. Don't get me wrong, there is definitely a level of success that we can achieve with the gift of gab or just knowing the right people. But the reality is it's not sustainable, okay? There are no shortcuts to sustainable, impactful success. And we have to accept that extraordinary results require extraordinary work effort. So, for example, while living and working as an expat in Eastern Europe sounds like a dream, it was, but it was really hard work. So, in addition to leading a team of 40 people and building a transformation team, I also had to do my regular work duties on Eastern Standard Time while I was 7 hours ahead. So that meant my workday consisted of me juggling 3 roles until 11 p.m. local time, but somehow, some way, I found a way to make it happen. Each of the promotions I received were not because people thought I was nice. It was because I proved to people through my work and results that I was capable. I had to work both smarter and harder because if you only work hard, somebody will outsmart you. And if you only work smart, somebody will work harder than you. But when you do both, you're unbeatable because most people are looking for the easiest way to obtain success. And how you show up becomes your competitive advantage to work and to win. So if you're still with me and you're following along, type "work and win" in the chat. All right, work and win. Yes, Caitlin. Okay, now I can't talk about winning and not talk about failure because winning is not the only part of my story, okay? Understand that the road to success does not come without its challenges. And we do ourselves a disservice with how we perceive failure. So it's critical that we change our attitude about failure because where there is no risk, there is no reward. So instead of shying away from or covering up our failures, we have to understand that each failure is an opportunity to write a triumphant story about how we overcame them. Now, everybody may not feel like they win often, but everybody has failed. It's inevitable. But if you're smart, you will leverage each failure as a tool to relate to people and build rapport. We'll talk more about managing failures later today as well. So before I give it all away, I want to walk you through the core elements of today's discussion. We're going to talk about framing the work, right? So being clear on these core elements will position you to take advantage of the opportunities that will establish your position on your team and in the eyes of your leader as the boss. All right. So first we start with your personal why. Then we look at who is your boss and how they show up. Next, we get into what your boss is working for so that we can understand where to focus. And once we nail that down, we get into how to get results. We'll wrap that up with when to be bold because timing is so key. And we're going to start by getting into the why. So I want to start by asking a question. Do you know what you're working for? If so, drop what it is that you're working for in the chat box. Would love to hear from you, ladies. Growth. I love that, Christy. I love that. So I truly believe like we all should operate in purpose on purpose. And in everything you do, whether it's inside or outside of the workplace, it's important that you're clear on why you are here. Growth and stability, financial security. I love this. Ooh, recognition as a subject matter expert, my daughter and myself. That's beautiful, Ashley. So in this slide, I show 2 layers of my why. But in reality, it always roots back to one, which is why you see that anchor there. My purpose is really what anchors me. Showing people the space between where they are and where they want to be is not as big as they think, and encouraging them to move, right? That extends into each role that I've had, each podcast episode I've published, every speech I've given, just like Michelle, helping others grow, okay? But it also trickles down to each and everything I do in the workplace. And it's what I remind myself of when things become challenging, when I get frustrated, even when I seek out new career opportunities. It's your responsibility to manage your career, and it's important for you to do the things that you enjoy. And not everybody knows what they enjoy. That's okay, because it's your responsibility to explore. That can be a part of your path and your process. So just start out by being intentional about finding work that's pleasant, that inspires you, that connects to something deeper. If there are any elements of the framework that I would say is most important, it's this one, because every other thing rests upon knowing your why. Okay. Now, another question is, how is your relationship with your manager? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Let me know in the chat. I've got a new boss now that I've got a fairly new role, and we're developing a pretty good relationship. I feel good about it, Femi says. Some neutral, some macro manager, some supportive. It's bad. Listen, it's all par for the course, okay? The reality is all bosses are not created equal. It's just not going to happen, right? And you can't earn your boss until you learn your boss. Savannah said it's good for the most days. She's got a little bit of freedom. That definitely feels good. We'll talk about micromanagers and macro managers here. So I've had the pleasure of having both. Do you ladies have a micromanager or a macro manager? You can let me know that in the chat too. I'll get into what micromanagers are. I'll start with them. So I find micromanagers are interested in every single detail. They want to know every move you make before you make it. And they're very critical of just about everything. Where on the other hand, macro managers that I've had didn't give much direction. Maybe they weren't as available as I needed them to be, but they still had expectations to get the job done. The thing to note here is that both managers want the same things. It's just different tactics on how to get there. The key is understanding which type of leader you have so you can adjust and execute accordingly. Micromanagers typically are seen as a nuisance, and sometimes they are. But what I've learned is that managing this type of leader is really doing myself the ultimate favor of getting them off of my back. Okay. The issue with micromanagers is that they're always on your neck. So to prevent that, I drive communication proactively. With the micromanager, the best way to manage them is to make it so that they don't have to ask you for anything. You can accomplish this through regular updates that highlight 4 key things. First, what you got done. Next, what you're working on. Then what you will work on next. And last, what you need from them to make it happen. Now, I learned 2 key things in delivering these updates to micromanagers. The first is that people are likely to ask you for anything when they owe you something. And second, it kept me accountable and more organized, which enhanced my performance. So everybody really wins. Now, let's dive into the macro managers. So, while many people think that they would love to have a macro manager, these leaders can also be challenging too because they're typically known for defining what it is that they want you to accomplish and not giving you much direction, if any at all, on how to get it done. I dealt with micromanagers in the beginning of my career, and just when I'd figured out how to manage them, I was blessed with a macro manager. And it was so challenging because my mistake was that I thought all managers wanted to be treated like micromanagers, and nothing could be less true. So, where my micromanagers appreciated and were responsive to my proactive communications, I would get nothing back from my macro managers. And that's when I learned that micromanagers have more of an appreciation for input while macro managers respond to output. The key with the macro manager is not the proactive communication about the path, but highlighting your results. Macro managers usually operate within a certain amount of confidence and trust with their teams. And it's because of that that they aren't really concerned with how you get things done as much as they are with you getting things done. And because they're motivated by results, you can leverage that to your advantage when seeking support. So, for example, if you're moving towards completion or on a project or a task and you encounter some roadblocks, strategically position your support request by focusing on how it will impact the end goal, because now they have an incentive to get involved. Another one of the most important strategies to use with a macro manager is to under promise and over deliver. If you want to know how much of a boss and a high performer you are, if you want your boss to know that, create the perception that you're constantly exceeding expectations, especially where their values are results oriented. So macro managers typically are flexible on anticipated timelines and completion. So you get a bit of play there. So if you can get something done in 10 days, tell them you need 13 or 14. If my manager needs something in 3 days, I work to get it done in 2. If she needs something by the end of the next day, I try to have it in her hands by noon. These are small things that are really big things and create your reputation of excellence, dependability, reliability. And this could be used for micromanagers as well, but I don't recommend it because micromanagers are so tuned into the bits and pieces of everything that they're more likely to challenge the timelines that you give them. Okay. So another question for you ladies, and maybe there's some gents attending too. Do you know what your manager's top 3 priorities are? You can let me know in the chat if you know what the top 3 things that your manager is focused on. And it's important to call this out because when you look around the workplace, there are thousands of things that can be improved, transformed, or completed, but we have to be cautious and intentional with what we do with our time. Okay. Sasha says they honestly change regularly and she always doesn't keep me motivated. Terry says, get it done. And those are his words. Linda said what Terry said, only number 1. Hey, 1 is better than none, Danielle. Timely update, issue call outs, be flexible. Yeah, blessed are the flexible for sure. So time is money, right? Our employees pay us in exchange for, at the simplest level, our time. So we can either invest it or waste it. There is no in between. So in order to determine which label each task falls within, we have to consider the output, or better stated, the value that it brings. Equally as important is the timing of your execution. So if your team or your company is in cost-cutting mode, it may not be the best time to find a new technology to invest in, even though a big, project may require that tool. Instead, look across the existing technology set, determine what's available at no cost that has the functionality to support 80% of the projects and that aligns with the direction the company is going. Being able to do that would pique your leader's interest. And sure, the tech option may be something that the organization will need to purchase, whether now or later, but the right things at the wrong time are the wrong things. So be careful and intentional about the timing of your suggestions and make sure they're in alignment with the key areas that your leaders are focused on. And if you don't know your leader's top 3 focus areas, just ask them. All right. Let's talk about staying in your lane. So, as you come up with opportunities to show just how much of a boss you are, it's important to understand the relevance of the opportunity and whose lane it falls in. Don't be the person that says, it's not my job. Although that may be true, being a boss is not about doing what's on your job description. It's about having the perspective to understand what's needed and having the vision and talent to execute thoughtfully. What you have to do is be cognizant of where your role and that of your manager intersect. And that's important because if you're looking to show how valuable you are, you have to consider your audience, your stakeholders, and what they're responsible for accomplishing. So, with that, one more question for you guys. Are you clear on how your role contributes to your boss's success? Let me know in the chat. And if you don't, there are so many ways that you can do this, right? Looks like you ladies are on the money. Helen says yes. Chrissy says yes. Savannah's like, absolutely. Angelica's like, okay, small team. Yes. Yes. The job is to make him look good. And our team. I love that. I love that. Cara says, and sometimes with remote work, it can be challenging. Absolutely so. Uh-oh, Sasha. She jumps into things that you own. Well, let's talk about how to do this. So simply talking to your boss about their job or even getting their job description is a good start. Compare that with yours and identify which of their goals your role is best positioned to help them achieve. And even if something is not your job, you still may be better positioned to have the perspective, autonomy, and decision-making capability that others may not have for you to be the best person to complete the task. So don't shy away from the things that aren't assigned to you, but are of value to your leader. Remember, your boss is the boss because they know what everyone needs to get done, and you having that much more insight positions you a step ahead of your peers. Now let's talk about how we measure this. Ladies, and maybe a couple of gents. I'm interested to know what you guys are doing in this arena. How often do you independently measure the impact of your contributions? Do you do it monthly? Do you look at it quarterly? Do you do it annually? MB Roman says weekly. Okay. Liana wants a quarter. Project by project. Okay. Kind of annually. Cara says, well, before you begin to execute on any project, initiative, or task, it's important that you understand and lock down how you will share your success. You treasure what you measure. Or as Jay-Z says, women lie, men lie, numbers don't. So as you create a strategy for sharing the success of your work, 2 types of measures that we want to talk through, okay? The first is quantitative. And these measures can be represented in many different ways. A few examples are listed here on the slide. How many dollars did you save, earn, or manage? How long, how many days did it take to get something done? What was the impact stated numerically of what you created or contributed to? It's no coincidence that the stock market, our salaries, raises, bonuses, even test scores are stated numerically. When you accomplish success, it's important that you share those successes with others, and your measurements are a critical piece of the story. Now, the next piece is qualitative. These measures are important for things with impact that can't easily be measured numerically. So how appealing was an ad that you created? Or if you did something for a client, what was their sentiment? Who has your work been recognized by? For example, earlier I mentioned that I went to go work in Romania. In order to do that, I had to write a proposal that was reviewed by some of the leaders at the company to get approved. Anybody can write a proposal, but a proposal Approved by the president of the company gives it a different level of significance. I also want to call out that the measures you'll use to define your impact should be established before you execute. This will help you determine whether your vision is truly valuable and relevant to your leader's goals. And don't become so attached to an idea because it's yours. If it doesn't make dollars, it might not make sense. And it's not just limited to that one quantitative measure, but each and any of them that are stated here, okay? Now, when it comes to being the boss, you have the option to ask for forgiveness or permission. So let me know in the chat, which do you typically ask for? Forgiveness or permission? Forgiveness, a lot of forgiveness. Okay, some permissions in there as well. All right, Nicole and Terry, forgiveness, permission. With a micromanager, Sasha, absolutely. Absolutely. Depends on the risk factor. Very smart, Sarah. I think you've been reading my notes. So I can't say that either of these options is better than the other. And that's because the direction that you should choose is based on a number of factors. So as you move along the path of showing your boss who's boss, this is the last step before execution. So it's important that you consider these 4 things. First, if you fail, if your plan completely flops, what will the impact be? How many clients would it touch? How many associates would be impacted? How many dollars are at risk? How many systems would be taken offline? You have to walk in understanding the risk of your strategy. And because there's a large risk doesn't mean that you shouldn't move forward, but you do have to balance that risk against the reward and understand what failure looks like before moving forward. The best thing you can do as part of your strategy, if you decide to move forward in spite of risk, is create a clear, tactical, get out of jail plan for if things go wrong. Again, remember, failure is about writing the victory story, right? Next, consider your company's culture. Do they value entrepreneurship? What are your organization's missions, vision, and values? And do they align with the direction that you're going with your plans? Now, each team within an organization has its own microcosm of culture. What does that look like? What is the posture of the people who are successful and celebrated at your organization? The third thing is performance currency. Be honest with yourself. Do you do good work? Does your leader believe you do good work? If you're a consistent high performer, it's more likely that you have the space to ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission. But if you're someone who has a reputation for not following through or doing quality work, or you're developing your brand, I'd suggest you lean on the side of permission. And permission is not a bad stance. It's all in how you play it, right? A lot of people will simply ask, can we do this thing? Which is totally wrong. A boss way to ask for permission is to approach your manager with a well thought out strategy and present it as, here's what we should do, why we should do it, how we get it done, and what the result would be. This positions you as a visionary, a thought leader, a high performer, and a whole boss. And the last item to consider is your relationship currency. This is one of the most powerful currencies that there is, and it's cultivated by building connections, not contacts, with people across your organization. These are the people that you work and interact with, that mentor and sponsor you, and are the people that you share your successes with. These relationships are very valuable because as you seek to make boss moves, these people are strategic levers that you can pull along the path of execution. Relationship currency will give you access to resources such as knowledge, funds, a seat at the table, access to people who can help you establish and enhance your reputation, and more importantly, execute on your vision. Not only because they like you, but because they know you and what you can accomplish. So as you think through whether the ask is for permission or forgiveness, consider whether you have relationship currency with your boss and beyond that will provide the safety net you need to succeed. And again, It's not that forgiveness is better than permission. You just have to be aware of the environment, the culture, and what's happening where you are to determine what your best approach should be. All right. So let's recap the framework. In short, you've got to assess and strategize before you execute. Before any and all things, be clear on your why. Okay. Understand whether your leader is a micromanager or a macro manager and adjust accordingly with either proactive communications or exceeding expectations. Next, be firm in your understanding of what the goals of your leader and team are. That will best position you to know where to focus, which is essentially the meeting point between your lane and your boss's lane. Once you have an idea of where to play, you're best positioned to understand how to get results and how best to measure them. Remember, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Your measures for work should be both qualitative and quantitative. And last, know when to be bold, which is always, but analyze the impact of failure, your organization's culture, while tallying up your performance currencies to determine whether your approach will be to ask for forgiveness or permission. Okay? So before we transition into Q&A, I want to invite each of you to continue elevating the exchange. You can visit my website, letsworkletswin.com, where you can join my Urban Girl Corporate World Facebook community, register for upcoming events, and listen to seasons 1 and 2 of the Urban Girl Corporate World podcast. As Sam mentioned, I got to interview Romy Newman, president and co-founder of our very own Fairygodboss.com, as well as many exciting others. Okay, Sam, I'm going to hand it back over to you for Q&A. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much, Nicole. What an amazing presentation. I loved reading everybody's comments in the chat there. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A right now. We'll get to as many as we have time for, and apologies in advance for the loud puppy in the background. But first question here from Emmanuel. How do you handle your own success when your direct boss has a bad relationship with their boss? Ooh, interesting question.
So that's challenging, right? Because typically all the crap, as they say, rolls downhill. But I think it's an interesting opportunity because it seems like if your boss is having a hard time with their manager, they typically may always be looking for a little bit of light or looking for a little bit of lifeline, right? Now, depending on why their relationship may be jaded, create some opportunity for you to be support for your boss. So if the reputation is jaded, because if the relationship is difficult between them because there's not enough productivity, you can step up to figure out ways to transform or streamline different processes, how to automate different work, helping your manager prioritize different tasks. Again, figuring out where your lane and their lane intersect and being a support for those projects. There's so many ways that you can inject yourself into your boss's sphere of responsibility to help them navigate how to be progressive, to navigate how to be productive. And again, everybody likes when the work gets done. So if you can position yourself to help your boss be productive and find success and make him or her look good, I think you have a good chance of being recognized as a boss and maybe one of your boss's favorite people for sure.
Awesome. Good question from Tiffany here. She just started at her company. She wants to know, how do I slyly figure out my manager's style, whether they're a micro or macro manager? And I think that's a really interesting question. I'd also love if you could touch on how you do that through a virtual setting, because being in person versus being virtual, totally different things. So do you have any tips for people on that?
Absolutely. So the question is so timely, Tiffany, because the first thing I did, I asked my new boss in the job interview what her style was. Are you interested in a lot of the details, or do you like to just give a little space and freedom and come and support along the way? So that could be the first thing, is simply asking them what they want. Something else you can do is talk to your peers, right? See what their experience is like working for your manager. Figure out what works for them, what hasn't worked for them. That can give you some insight. You can also take a look at your boss's habits, right? So, how often do you have team meetings? Do you meet weekly with your boss as a collective or less than weekly? Separate from that, one-on-ones. Does your boss want to meet with you weekly? Do they want to meet with you bi-weekly, or do they want to meet with you once a month? Typically, I find that macro managers typically want to meet less, both with the team and individually. But if they're leaning towards micromanager style, you will see constant updates on your calendar. So ask during the interview or ask outright. Talk to your team members and analyze the habits of your boss to determine if they are macro or a micromanager.
Awesome. Great question from Sarah here. How has your definition of success changed over time?
So when I graduated from college, I just wanted to work on Wall Street, and I just wanted to work for the biggest bank on Wall Street. And that's exactly what I did. And I checked that box. Then I wanted to travel. So success was travel. So I got with a consulting firm and then traveled all over the world. And then you realize that the world is smaller than you think. And sometimes there's a sense of familiarity with every place that you go. Then I realized that I really like helping people. And that's when I got into a lot of community service work, public speaking, and coaching. So I think as I've matured as a person, as my why has developed and changed, and as I've tapped into what my purpose in life is, my definition of success has evolved with each and every one of those. So it's totally a journey. And it probably will
Uh,
continue to change too.
I feel like you have to be open to change. Your story is a great example of that as well. I like this question from an anonymous attendee here. How do you handle when your CEO is your manager and they're too busy to discuss career goals because you're at a small company?
Yeah. So I've worked in a small shop before. The great thing about working in a small shop is that typically you don't find that the organization has a lot of levels, right? So that means there's so much access to the C-suite executives. But then everybody is so busy. Everybody is so busy. So again, I think one of the things being reporting to the CEO is advantageous because you can find different sources to gauge what their priorities are. So if it's a public company, you can listen to the financial calls, you can read the news on Bloomberg, you can look at the different initiatives. How does the CEO communicate with the company? So some do blog posts, some do different emails. Typically you'll find at year end or the holidays when financial results come out, they talk about these things. Figure out how to tap into some of that information and analyze that as what they want everyone else to see, right? They typically will share what's important with a broader audience. Now, you have the perspective in partnering with them and working. Maybe you can't grab them as much, but you can work with your other peers. Look at what they're focused on. How are they measuring their goals? What are the company goals? So anytime you can get access to any of that information, whether it be public, whether it be internally, you can combine all of that together to craft a plan for where you want to spend your efforts. And I would say, don't be afraid to get on your CEO's calendar for lunch. A 30-minute chat can make the world of a difference. Get with their admin, see if you can get something on the calendar, maybe at the top of the year, because we're coming into holiday season, and maybe check in with them monthly or quarterly. Again, a CEO is busy. They're more than likely going to be a macro manager, but you've got to be proactive and intentional about figuring out what your lane is and getting the visibility and attention and support from them that you need.
Awesome. A lot of questions coming in right now that are really interesting. Somebody did ask about the recording. You'll get it by this afternoon, whenever the recording downloads. So be on the lookout for that in your inbox. But this is a great question as well. It kind of piggybacks off of the one you just had, but how do you learn about the goals of your manager when you're excluded from those insights? I've had bosses that have their favorites who they share their goals with, and then everybody else just gets tasks to complete, no context. So how do you deal with, I guess, managers having favoritism?
lean on the favorites. They've got all the information, right? It's not about where you get it from. The important thing is that you get the information. You can learn a lot by studying the favorites of your manager. I mentioned early in the presentation, figure out who the people are at your organization that are celebrated. Those are the people that probably have good habits. They've got a lot of connections. They've got a lot of relationship and performance currency. Take the best practices from what they do and how they do it, engage them, pull them into your network. Those are the people that you want to learn from. And I'm pretty certain that once you figure out where you need to focus, you'll probably be pulled into that favorites conversation too.
Awesome. And I see some questions in the chat. Feel free to leave them in the Q&A. It's the easiest place for us to manage them. But this is a great question as well. It's about sharing successes with your boss. If you're doing cross-functional work, or you're just doing work that maybe your boss isn't looped into and they're not in the know for it, how do you suggest sharing your contributions and successes without seeming overly self-promotional? But you also don't want to wait just until review time to share them. What's your advice there?
Yeah, this is a challenge, especially for women, right? Because we typically like to play down, in my experience, we like to play down our accomplishments, or we don't want to come off as if we're bragging. One of the things I think that will help with this, especially how we feel about how we show up, is number one, keeping an inventory for yourself of your own accomplishments. This is why I asked the question earlier. How often do you measure your performance? It's so important to have an inventory of those accomplishments and share them, because you don't just want to wait until review time to tell your boss what you accomplished. The reality is we come to work to accomplish things. So as part of your job, it's important that you share with your boss what those boxes are that you've checked off. What are those things that you've helped move along? When I asked earlier about the top 3 things that your boss is focused on, figure out what those things are. And you can make 3 columns as you plan for the conversation with your boss. Put that against the list of accomplishments that you have, and you can match each of those accomplishments up with each of their priorities. Of course, everything isn't going to align. That's fine. You don't have to let your boss know every single thing that you did, but you do want to help them see that you're moving the needle in the areas that are of importance to them. That can begin to create somewhat of an agenda for your conversation when you do your regular check-ins with them. And because it's specifically related to what's important to your manager, it won't feel like you're bragging. You're actually talking about how you contributed to the team's success.
That's a great way of putting it. You're not just, you're not bragging. You're telling them, hey, we're both successful in this. You're sharing a success together. I think that's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
This is a toughie here, but an anonymous attendee wants to know if you have any advice on handling a manager who sees you as competition. So maybe a bit of a toxic manager here.
That can be challenging. So typically with managers who see you as competition, the best way to disarm them is to partner with them. Pull them in on everything, right? Let them be a part of your path to success. And don't be afraid to share that you guys are partnering together. One, it shows that you are the bigger person, which is good for your reputation. But secondly, depending on how competitive they're going to be less likely to try to trip you up because they know that their reputation is on the line as well. So I think the best way is to pull them in. Like they say, keep your friends close, enemies closer. Do the same thing with your manager. And again, always aligning what you're focused on to what's important to them is the key, because everybody wants to be recognized as a high performer. They don't want to look bad to their boss. So if you can help them look good, it's more than likely that they will see you as a peer or a part of the team as opposed to opposition. Great question.
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure. This is an interesting question from Stephanie, and I'm sure it could be very subjective, but how do you narrow the focus down on what you want to be known for when you're passionate and good at multiple things that are all beneficial to your role and your career and your growth? How do you pick those things that you want everybody to know you for?
So I think your brand is intentional, um, but maybe a good thing to be known for is being good at a lot of things, right? It's having a reputation of excellence. So one of the things that I tell a lot of the leaders that I work with, in my role, I'm somewhat of a liaison between the cybersecurity office and the business. So I have eyes and ears and influence on a lot of little things. One of the things that I like to tell my business partners is that if they need anything, even if they think I'm not the right person, to come to me, because if I don't have the answer or if I'm not the person, I will find the answer or the person. That is a skill that is very hard to come by, and people navigating unknown spaces or new territories or new projects or new teams, it's very, very useful and helpful for them. I think as you begin to help and support people by showcasing different pockets of your talent, you'll begin to see which things people begin to lean on you for. And that's where you'll be able to know that you're building that brand or that reputation of reliability in those specific focus areas. So just be great at everything that you do. And I think naturally the peak areas will begin to shine through. It's a great question.
And I like this one here from Jody, very practical advice she's looking for. How do you best use your time in meetings with your manager and your boss?
First thing is planning. So I talk to my manager for a one-on-one for 30 minutes every other week. She is amazingly busy, but she's very, very supportive. And again, I'm well aware of what her key focus areas are. And typically, what I like to do is talk about, for each of those three areas, most recent accomplishments and where I need her support, right? So with her being a macro manager, she responds to results and she will give support. She'll give support, but she will be more intrigued or engaged to give support when she understands how it relates to the specific goal. So I try to always have three key points, or three key areas that I know that she's focused on, and those are my priority projects. And I give her updates on what I've accomplished and what I need from her. And then if I want to run some ideas by her, I can do that in the extra time. But I want to make sure that she knows that I'm spending my time in the best way possible and that things are moving along. So definitely plan, plan, plan.
And I know we've already touched on the topic of toxic bosses, but that seems to be a big question among our audience today.
Mhm.
So let's say you've already tried working with your boss, trying to show them that your own success is their success as well. But they don't support your career growth and they don't want you to get to the next level. And this person asked, "What if my boss is talking bad about me and discrediting my work?" How do you navigate situations like that?
So the first thing I would do is just approach my boss. And I wouldn't say, "Why are you talking trash about me?" or something like that. But I would say to them, how do you define success? What is somebody in my role that is successful? What does it look like? How can I improve in the work that I'm doing? And how can you help me get there? Right? It's really a good way to gauge if they're going to be honest with you about your performance, which is very important. If you do not have some sort of trust between you and your boss, right? The first thing I would do is try to establish it. If you try to do that and you're unsuccessful, then I think the thing that you need to start thinking about is this the right place for you? Because everything else, I mean, what relationship outside of with your boss is more important in the organization that you work for? It's going to reflect on the experience that you have every day, your promotional opportunities, your performance is likely tied to your pay, your bonus structure, things of that nature. You have every incentive to find an organization with a culture that promotes integrity and honesty and collaboration between you and your manager. And if you've tried and you can't get there where you are, then more than likely you need to ask yourself a different question. It's not about your boss, but it's about the company. So you may want to look at other opportunities in that same organization. If your boss will be successful in helping you leave, that may be a part of the conversation. Hey, I'm looking to do different things. Here's why. Not about them being a sucky boss, but about your own personal growth and development that you're not necessarily engaging with the projects that you have. And ask them if they have any ideas about where you'd best be better suited in the organization. If so, great. If not, move on.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, there's a statistic out there, and I can't think of exactly what it is, but essentially more people leave a company because of a bad boss than anything else. So
Absolutely.
having a manager who that will support your career growth is critical to your success. So thank you for that great advice. And an interesting question from Corey here. I was up for promotion and then I got a new boss at my current job. Now I feel like I'm starting over. Do you have any advice on how I can move forward and get back on track for that promotion? Sorry, my dog
Corey,
is going crazy.
Corey, I've been there before. I've been there before. And you know what? Get back to the basics. There's nothing wrong with starting over with a new boss. The thing is, typically when I'm seeking to be promoted or when I'm up for promotion, I typically start with, what does my boss need to see in order for me to move to the next level? Right? Understanding where the gaps are between my current performance and next level performance. You can ask your boss that. Again, I talked earlier about pulling job descriptions. Pull down the job descriptions for your current role and your ideal next role, and do your own gap analysis and figure out how to build those skills and those characteristics in each and every project that you have. Set up regular meetings with your boss, your new boss, and share that plan with them, right? Manage your career. Tell them what's important to you. Tell them that you are on the path. Show them what you had mapped out, what you've already accomplished, what's left, and how can you and he or she partner together to make sure that you get to build those muscles on new projects. You can be upfront and discuss timeline. Again, under promise, over deliver is always a great strategy. We talked about that earlier, but don't be dismayed. I will also say different bosses have different ideas of what they need to see from employees to move to the next level. Figure out what that boss needs and give it to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Nicole. Really appreciate this presentation and answering all of our questions. As I mentioned before, we'll be sending out the recording as well as Nicole's contact info later today, so you'll have all of that in your inbox. Nicole, any last words before I sign off here?
I just want to thank you, Sam, for this amazing opportunity. Thank you all for attending, and let's work, let's win.
Thank you, everybody, for a great year of webinars at Fairygodboss. This is the last one of 2020, so we'll see you all in 2021. Crazy to say. Have a happy holiday season and a happy new year. We'll catch you at the next one. Bye.